Hello, my name is Jenny Nagir-Ish, and I am an LPC and RDMT currently working at Mindfulness Counseling based out of Chagrin Falls, Ohio, which is about half hour south of Cleveland. I would love to take this opportunity to welcome you to this virtual presentation of Becoming Unveiled, the healing properties of Oriental belly dance. So welcome. I'm glad you could join me virtually from the comfies of your own home or wherever you are in the world. And I would like to honor that belly dance does have a very strong social aspect. And I was very excited to honor that in person with all of you. And took a little navigating to bring that to this virtual platform. And we are going to move it's several points, should you choose. We will incorporate some movement, and I will ask you to pause your computer at that point if you want to explore further and deeper on your own and get curious with the movement. And I will share my contact information at the end, so you can feel free to reach out with me, connect with me, share your curiosities, share your epiphanies, and whatever came up during those movement experiences, ask your questions, and I'll try and find a way to put it all together so we can have that sense of community and that shared experience. For this presentation, we're going to start with a little overview of the history of Oriental belly dance, and then I'll move into the current flavors that are out there existing alive and thriving in the world today, and then shifting gears to look at the therapeutic aspects of this dance. And then start to bring in the questions. We know from meta-analysis and various research studies have demonstrated that belly dancing does have a lot of healing properties that women have reported it across cultures to be very beneficial for a myriad of ways. But to try and get curious and start to pull apart what aspects of this dance are facilitating this healing, is that the cultural elements, the social elements, the movements themselves, the rhythms, the polyrhythms, the isolations versus full body movement. Let's get excited. We're going to try a lot of these on and just be curious. And then I'm going to move into some of the research that has been done, and I'll share my thesis study, which looked at where I narrowed in and looked at 3 specific movement rhythms that are kind of central to this ancient dance form. So without further ado, I do want to also apologize for the glare in my glasses. Could take them off, but then bad things happen to my eyes. So I appreciate you bearing with the glare. So moving right along, I'm going to share my screen with you. So here is my contact information. And again, I will share my email address and my phone number again at the end. So when we think of belly dance, for many people, this image of ancient Egypt springs to mind. And while we don't genuinely know what the movements of those historic dances look like, we do know that in ancient Egypt, a lot of the dance revolved around the goddess Hathor. So Hathor was the goddess of music and dance, and she was celebrated widely across a lot of festivals, drawing in this aspect of music and dance into a lot of celebrations. We also have pictures that the ancient Egyptians left behind, and a lot of the pictures depict some of the serpentine arm movements and castanets, zeals, finger symbols. They have a variety of words depending on which culture we're talking about and what the castanets or zeals are made of. In ancient Egypt, it was expected that they were most likely wooden, but again, we're not 100% sure. We also know that they did backbends. Backbends were incorporated into dance movement, but what the movement itself looked like, we don't honestly know. What most people agree on is that what we know as belly dance today actually came out of northern India over 100 years ago. And this nomadic tribe traveled out of the north of India and across the Black Sea region. And the Black Sea region was where it split. And one part of the tribe kept traveling across and down into what is current day Spain. and this evolved into flamenco. So flamenco is like the sister dance of belly dance, and you can see a lot of similarities, the percussive movements versus the flowing movements, and just the female power. So take a notice next time, get curious. This other half of the tribe from the Black Sea region went directly south, and it filtered out across the Ottoman Empire. It's a very, very expansive empire stretching from China over to Europe. And as it traveled south and across the Marmara Sea into northern Egypt, it picked up a lot of cultural influences along the way. And this dance form was absorbed into a lot of these cultures along the way, and they still exist and thrive there today with their own variety, their own flavor, if you will, of this dance form. So in the Ottoman Empire, which is current day Turkey, there were the palaces with the sultans, and there were the harems. Harems were women-only areas of the palace. It would be a whole section of the palace with its own bathhouse and pretty much self-contained. And it was women only. There was no looking through a little keyhole into the bathhouse. But we have all of these paintings that were created, romanticized, sexualized from this taboo that these men never saw, but yet they were creating these beautiful paintings using just their imagination. And this is what was taken back to the rest of Europe. Look at these harem girls, nearly nude, lounging beside these bathhouses and pools and playing music and dancing for each other. And this was that picture that snapshot picture that Europe had of what happened inside of harems, but it wasn't completely accurate. There are some writings by female travelers who did get to step inside, who did get to meet some of these women of the harem, and they did talk about the vibratory movements and the fluidity of the movements and the isolation versus the full body movements. But again, these are written words that we don't actually have a clear depiction of the movement that happened in the harems. So again, traveling south, we go back into Egypt, and then you have that reabsorption of these paintings, these backbends, the finger symbols, and the celebration of Hathor being reabsorbed into what is current day belly dance. So it kind of had this birth and then reabsorption of all of these cultures. You may also hear of the Oud Nal. The translation is the children of iron-plated sandals. The Oud Nal were in Algeria. Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. The Oud Nal lived in Algeria, and daughters were highly celebrated in this culture because it was the daughters who would learn this art form, learn this dance, and they would travel to neighboring cities and towns and become street performers. Some of them would also engage in prostitution, and they would collect all this money from performing at events and just dancing in the streets, prostitution, and they would sew all of their earthly belongings onto their clothing for security. And this is where we get the coined belts and bras that we see sometimes with the belly dancing. So they would take this money and all of their earnings, and they would take it back to the village, and then they would settle down, have a family, and be a fully respected female of society, teach her daughters the dance, and they again would go out and bring the wealth back to the city. So women were, daughters were highly celebrated. And like the Oud Nal in Egypt, there were the Gawazi family, just a family of sisters who were street performers. It's very debated if they engaged in prostitution or if they were just respected performers, but you can find these families and these little tribes of performers throughout all of these regions that belly dance traveled through and kind of set up residence. In Morocco, this dance is very acknowledged for the ability to help a woman prepare for carrying a child in the womb and birthing the child, sorry. So when a woman is in active labor, In Morocco, the entire village, all of her friends and family can gather, and while she's in labor, women will dance for her, reminding her of where her power is, reminding her of where her energy is, and reminding her how to move and soothe some of those labor pains, and also help the child move down the birth canal and give birth. It's also has a very social aspect that women will gather, not just in Morocco, but in many of these countries, women will gather to belly dance together. It's just a way to socialize, to have their own thing amidst the men, that men are not privy to this event. We're going to come together and be free to be ourselves, and we're going to dance amongst ourselves with freedoms that we don't typically have in this patriarchal society. In Persia is where they started doing a lot of the balancing things, balancing the tea tray, swords. They brought the zils and the castanets back in, playing a lot of finger cymbals. And Persia was another place of just like this reabsorption of this dance. And then in the 1920s World Fair, belly dance came to the US for the first time. And it was tossed up there on the stage with no context, no depth, no meaning, just a visual spectacle to be looked at. And this was being watched by a culture that was very different from where belly dance had been existing and being like reshaped. So in the US in the 1920s, women were very corseted, very covered, very restrained in many ways. So looking at this woman who is free to move her spine, who is free to move her body, it was labeled the hoochie coochie dance. And a woman named Little Egypt, some theorize there were multiple Little Egypts, some think it was just one woman. She really had this sass of character about her that really kind of helped this hoochie coochie name gain momentum. Yeah, just being free to live in your body and use your spine, these freedoms that these constrained women didn't have. It's very foreign, very exotic, and we're just going to look at it and add our own implications to it without really understanding the depth and the meaning behind and within this dance form. Dancing with veils, the big pieces of fabric, usually silk to catch the air and movement. This was also incorporated in the US. This is a fairly new addition to the belly dance repertoire, and even more recent, we now have like Isis wings and fan veils and fire pieces. So we're really kind of modernizing it and really getting into the props lately. So with that in mind, let's look at some of the modern flavors that this dance form has today. So in a lot of countries, we think of our Arabic speaking countries that have belly dancing. In those countries, it's known by, we have two flavors, two varieties. We have Raqs Baladi. Raqs Baladi is a native dance. It's very pelvic driven in nature. It has like this pulse to it. And it's a dance of the people. It's what the people may dance at a wedding, in a lot of celebrations. It's Raqs Baladi. Let's go out to the nightclub and we're gonna dance. Raqs Sharqi is what you might hear a lot of in the US. This is a very common one. If you're going to go to a Middle Eastern restaurant, you might see someone doing a version of Raqs Sharqi. It's the Eastern dance. It's acknowledging the elements of the Indian origins, the Persian influences, the Turkish influences, and even ballet, making it a more aesthetically pleasing version of this dance. And this is where you have the typical rhinestone bra and rhinestone belt and a more narrow skirt. And if you were in Egypt or in some of these other countries that have Raqs Sharqi performances, at the more elite weddings, you'll find a Raqs Sharqi dancer. At some of the fancy nightclubs, restaurants, dinner ships, maybe even might have a Raqs Sharqi performance. And this dance might last an hour in length, but the dancer touching upon every emotion. I'm gonna make everybody excited and have fun. And then we're gonna, I'm gonna talk about my broken heart and pull the tears out of people. And this dance can go on for an hour, taking up a good chunk of the evening, sometimes more. So just that ability and that acknowledgement of touching on all of the emotions is, I think, something that might like perk our interest up as therapists of, here's a spot that might be useful. Looking at the very close cousin of the Raksharki is the Turkish oriental dance. You'll hear me say oriental belly dance a lot because I am primarily Turkish in my style. I've lived in Turkey for 4 years performing and teaching oriental dance. Other people also use oriental dance to try and elevate and acknowledge the roots of the art form, where just the word belly dance kind of got pulled down in the 1920s. So trying to bring back that awareness using the word oriental dance. Turkish style is very upbeat. Turkish style, we are here to party, we are here to have fun, we do not have the time to be sad. So it's a very, very high energy driven, uplifting celebratory dance for weddings, for corporate events, for just a fun night out at a good restaurant. And because it's so upbeat, shows are much shorter, typically about 20 minutes in length. It has a very high interactive component. And there's also, and you're gonna have the same rhinestone bra, belt, and usually a fuller skirt. In Turkish style, you might also do floor work, going down to the floor, or even standing on a drum to showcase yourself during a drum solo. The street version is the Gypsy Romani dance. The Gypsy Romani dance typically has 9/8 rhythm, and it's again very driven by the pelvis. In Turkish, it's a pelvic drop, where in Baladi it's a pelvic lift usually, but the Romani dance is a pelvic drop. It's like a release, 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 dun, dun, dun. And this dance can be pulled into the Turkish oriental belly dance. Sometimes you'll see moments and little pieces of this. But again, the Gypsy Romani dance is a very folkloric dance by people in the street, dance by the gypsies every day today. And then moving over into Greece. So the Greeks have their own flavor, somewhere between the Arabic and the Turkish. And the Lebanese, again, it's a very similar, in the same family, they have the skimpiest costumes and like 5-inch heels sometimes, just adding their flavor to it. And then moving to America, in America, we have two main forms. We have the cabaret. The cabaret style is, the more typical Raksharki or Oriental, Turkish Oriental, or what's labeled as cabaret in the US. Usually has a soloist, one dancer, interacting with the audience. In the US, it tends to be more recorded music and choreographies. And then the other one is tribal belly dance. Tribal belly dance is now being known as FCBD, after Fat Chance Belly Dance, which is where this tribal dance started. So honoring its roots by naming it FCBD now. It's a fusion dance form, pulling in a little bit of Gothic style, pulling in from a lot of different styles, just incorporating what works for you. So this idea of strong fusion elements, sometimes doing group work, sometimes having an individual, but really bringing your own flavor and honoring your uniqueness. And in this photo, this is actually a friend of mine who is a tribal belly dancer, Ilya Jenny Cohen. And so you can see it has a similar taste of costuming, but a lot more personal style, a lot more freedom to add your 2 cents to it. And I think this brings us to another one of the draws that's very welcoming from belly dance, is this idea of inclusivity. Traditionally, when belly dance is danced, it was by everyone in the society, the grandmas, the children, every age was welcome. In a lot of these cultures, we're all going to dance together. We're all going to move slightly differently because of where our body's at, and just because of how our body's put together. So it's not necessarily about the aesthetic line that you might get from modern or ballet or some other dances, but it's about the feeling. So coming back to the feeling and honoring our uniqueness. So again, the little therapy ear of, these are things that may be useful just from a cultural aspect. Another thing that I think is extremely powerful, is honoring the connection to the goddess. It's hard to separate oriental belly dance from this idea of the goddess. So I'd like to share this quote with you, a quote by Marilyn Stone that I found in Stewart. "The goddess leads us into the spiral dance of life. She sends forth the winds, the whirling energies that bind existence in eternal motion. Through dance, she teaches her children movement and change." Really like that last line. Through dance, she teaches her children movement and change. I feel that when we travel through life, we're constantly being shaped and reshaped and molded by our experiences. And sometimes we get stuck in a shape that we didn't really want, just from this outside influence, the way it reacted on us or interacted or got stuck. And through dance, I think it's a beautiful way that we can take this way that we've been shaped. And through dance, we can explore it and kind of remold it and say, no, this is how I want to wear this. This is how I'm going to reshape myself, redefine myself. And I think honoring that connection to the goddess kind of helps take back that female power. Once upon a time, there were many goddess worshiping religions. The nighttime was a time of sacred, and the dome shape of the womb was honored. And then the world transitioned into this honoring of the sun and honoring of like the sun above, and honoring the male and having all these male gods. And a lot of these feminine dances have been kind of pushed to the side and shoved into the darkness, where belly dancing has kind of remained. It's traveled, it's absorbed, and it's constantly evolving and being reshaped by all these little pockets that hold on to this dance and recreate it as their culture changes and shifts. But this still remains a sacred place where these women can gather, and women can honor who they are. They can honor the ties to the goddess. And by honoring the tie to the goddess, women are free to know her will. A woman is free to believe that her will is valid, and a woman is free to believe that her will can be achieved in the world. And these three things can be very challenging in a patriarchal society. But again, just by honoring the goddess, can we help women start to take that power and say, it's okay if I have an opinion and desires and wants and needs, and that my wants and needs have value, and that my wants and needs that have value can be achieved in this world, that I can reshape this world. It's not just a place that I'm living in and being defined by, but I can have this influence back out into the world. And I think that's a very powerful thing to acknowledge. Belly dance is also more accepting of different body types. You'll see all bodies, shapes, sizes, weights. And belly dancing is one of those dances that it's okay to be wherever you're at, with whatever age, whatever body shape, and just having this open embrace and having this connection to the spirit. Research by myself and Mo has acknowledged that this helps women access their inner wisdom. It helps them connect with spirit and helps express and facilitate emotional shifts. It helps reconcile verbal and emotional abuse. It's been shown to help women release judgment and control, acknowledge self-worth, change socially constructed boundaries regarding sexuality, and a whole slew of other great benefits. And when you start reading the research, you start hearing these themes over and over, this broad variety of healing benefits that these women are reporting. So let's start shifting gears and look at the why. What could possibly be the reason that these women are finding belly dance to be so powerful? So I think a big piece of it is looking at the mind, the body, and emotions and movement, and how these things are all intertwined. So Jung acknowledged, he believed, that the mind and the body were not these two parallel structures kind of running parallel with each other, but that the psychic and the physical realms were connected through this reciprocal action, one feeding into the other, and that they were feeding into each other through this dynamic bridge of emotion connecting the psyche and the soma. So one way to think of this is, think of some time that you got some really bad news, like your mind was just in a bad place. I can't handle any more bad news. And what did that do to the rest of you? So my mind gets bad news, my emotion shifts to sadness, distraught, worry, fear, whatever. And what happens to my body? You know, maybe I get nauseous, maybe my heart feels heavy, my spine curves. Yeah, there's this condensing, and it's all connected. Have you ever had a moment where you get all this bad news and your head is in a bad place and your body's just like, all this energy with all this bad news? No, it doesn't happen, right? They're connected. And likewise, if we're feeling sick, let's say you have the flu and you're nauseous and your throat hurts and your sinuses and your body's a physical mess from the flu. And then the neighbor is like, hey, I just won the lottery. You're like, whoa, that's awesome for you. I will be excited for you tomorrow when I feel better. It's hard to match that mental awareness of, oh, this is a good thing when our body's in a bad place. But if our neighbor comes to us and like, hey, I won the lottery, I'm going to give you half, and you're feeling healthy, you can have that big emotion of like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Woohoo! I got so much energy. Let's go spend it. You know, there's this connection. And how does this translate to belly dance, you might ask? Good question. So in belly dancing, there's this very strong component of internalizing movement and externalizing movement. There are moments of, I'm going to experience this chest circle for myself. What does this feel like to me? And then I'm going to share this with the world. And what does this feel like when I share it with the world? Yet it's a different quality. Try it on for yourself for a second. What's it like? How does this feel on the inside? How am I feeling? And then how is this received by the world? It's almost this, you know, I'm physically feeling it. And then as I spread it out, I'm becoming more mentally aware of it. And what's the emotional rebound that happens between this self-exploration and this awareness and sharing? And that leads me into what Mary Whitehouse was working with. She acknowledged that intentional movement, she believed intentional movement was directed by the ego. So our ego is directing our intentional movements, and our unintentional movements are being directed by our subconscious. This unconscious level is kind of driving the things that we do without thinking about it, you know? And this piece of self unites both and creates awareness. So when we're going about our day and we're moving in ways that we're not really paying attention, things are flying under the radar, and then we do something that's directed by the ego, we do something in our awareness, that bridge of self that can connect, oh, what I was doing and what I'm doing now, can kind of bring things to awareness. If this is hard to understand, let's look at the improvisational side of Oriental belly dance. When we improvise, a lot of times we're just following something that comes up. Something that comes up and, oh, I'm going to move here, that feels good. And then, oh, that looks good, let's make it into this shape. So there's that transition between following the unintentional and just, oh, this thing came out, and then I'm going to do this with it. That unintentional to intentional. And a lot of times in this process of, I'm going to follow this thing with curiosity, see where it goes, and then, okay, well, now I want to do this with it. Then we start adding meaning to it. Oh, this means this. It just came from nowhere, but this is where it's going, and this is what it means. So belly dance is improvisational by nature, following that impulse of what comes up. And when true belly dance is done, it has a live audience and it has a live band, and it's interacting and feeding off of the audience. And it's also interacting and feeding off the music of, I'm going to follow the music and just let it go where it needs to go. And then if I need to follow what's inside of me, the music will follow me. And we can have this exchange. in this conversation. Again, the internalizing to the externalizing. What do I feel? And the musician is going to follow me. And then, okay, now I can follow you and be external. In this conversation, this inward and outward, this drawing things from the unconscious, drawing them up, drawing them from the body level and the mind, tying them together with the emotions. And Norma Canner speaks of knowing things at a different level. She talked about knowing something through movement and then speaking about it. Sorry for the typo about, well, you can peek at it and then speak about it and name it at another level. So looking at the movement, feeling the movement, and then taking it to another level of talking about it. And this helps you know it at another level, helps you get a better grasp on what's going on. And in belly dance, again, we have this social element of I'm interacting with these other dancers, or I'm interacting with this audience, or I'm interacting with this music. So there's this conversation, there's this time of being seen, this time of being reciprocated and accepted, and embracing, here's my inner movement, my inner experience, how I feel in my body. Here's me externalizing it, reaching out to the community, socializing, knowing it at a different level, being able to then process it verbally later. So belly dance naturally has all of these elements already incorporated into it. So with that said, knowing how our minds, bodies, and emotions are already kind of intertwined and how belly dance is already kind of primed for this work, let's look at the movement. What do we move, right? So in belly dance, there's a lot to be moved. There's a lot that could possibly be moved. We can have full body movements. Pardon me as I adjust here. Get a drink. Stay hydrated, it's important. Let's look at incorporating full body movement, isolations, and poly movements. Now, how can this be useful for a person? If we're using the full body, let's say like we start with this little like sideways undulation, doesn't have to be pretty. We're just moving the whole body. Or maybe we're going to take a hip circle, yeah? And that hip circle was so big that the whole body is involved in this reaching out in multiple directions at once. What's it like to use this whole body? If I invest all of me, if I explore all of me, what's this experience like? And again, adding in different layers, if I'm internalizing this, I'm like, what's it? You know, what's my own internal exploration and experience of this? And then what's it feel like to open my eyes and maybe just have a little shift of direction and share this? Do I think about what my experience of this is and who I identify myself with versus how the world sees me? How can this help somebody possibly look at their self-esteem, look at their self-concept, do this action in the mirror? Is what I see the same as what I feel? Is it better or worse, different? What is this? Internalizing and externalizing with all of me. Also, if we move through moments of isolation, can we help somebody re-assimilate a body part that's been disassociated with, or a piece that has had a traumatic experience that's a little touchy to reintegrate and reclaim? So for example, if I've had a trauma, a sexual trauma, so if moving this area is really stiff and rigid, maybe I'm kind of disengaged and I just kind of walk around through space with like this neutral pelvis, because I just don't want to have this awareness. If I can do like a shimmy, loosen it up, free it up, if I can have it here in my chest, I can put it here in my hands, I can put it in my arms, I can put it in my head, I can put it down in my feet, I can put it in all the rest of me and ground, and you know, this is how I feel free. can I explore with what it feels like to reuse this part of my body, to reclaim this part of my body? And if, okay, I'm not ready to go there, I can ground myself back in, I know all of this part of me. I know all this part of me. Can I reassimilate this part of me and get it all together at some point? What's that like? You know, so finding a way to be able to ground in something that's familiar. I got this part is fine. Can I then explore this? Can I start reintegrating and reincorporating the whole experience? And if that's too much, I can always go back. I can always check that body part out, ground myself, soothe myself, recollect myself, and then maybe explore with just that part. It's too much, ground myself away from that body part, and then bring it all together eventually. Could this be used, this isolation to full body movement, could this be used to help people reassimilate and befriend these body parts that have been segmented and disassociated or traumatized? And then we look at polymovements. So polymovements might be clashing in nature, two different things, contrasting elements. So if we have a shimmy down here, we have a shimmy down below, maybe we do something soothing with the top. So a shimmy down below, and shimmies, by the way, sorry, I should backtrack. So a shimmy is just the knees going back and forth, soft ankles, and the knees going back and forth, allowing the hips to have that space to travel up and down. That's where your shimmy comes from. So again, softening those ankles, giving that space for the shimmy. And then if I have this poly movement, yeah, what's it like to do two things that don't fit? Can this help a person who has a lot of different roles kind of make peace and adjust to having all of these roles? So if my kids are wild, my kids are running around the house, they're going to be a shimmy down here, okay? So my kids are the shimmy, and then I have my career. Got my career going up here. Got my career going up here. And then I've got laundry to do. There's my laundry. There's my laundry, my kids, and my career. I got it all going on. And to some people, their brains might be and fried. And that's okay. That's the reality, right? That's what happens. And then, oh, I got my relationship to go, and there, maybe that's an 8. So my relationship is mixed up with my kids. Oh, crap, there I dropped my career. Yeah, keep my career going. And you can see it can be really challenging. In mine, fry your brain, test your body. But what happens if we've experienced this, and then we can say, oh, and amidst all that chaos, what if we just pause and do my laundry? Can I find satisfaction in a well-folded pair of pants and get my laundry done? And then when my laundry's done, I can put it down and play with my kids. And then maybe while I'm playing with my kids, my husband can be there too. Yeah, so I can have my relationship with my spouse while I'm playing with my kids. And then maybe I need to drop those while I focus on work. And if I can pass through these things, and sometimes they work together. Yeah. Sometimes we need to let go of one thing and focus on the other. And they can flow into one another. And laundry is always coming up and jumping out over there. Never stop. Yeah. So what's this like? Can this help a client who has multiple roles and struggles with just mentally, yeah, it's great to have this mindful task of, I'm going to take this piece off and set it aside. I'm going to leave work at work. You know, it's good in theory, but what's it like to try on? If I do it with my body, can I, oh, that's it. I felt it now. I get it. I'm going to get fried if I do everything at once. Yeah? Versus being able to separate. How can I separate? What's it feel like when one thing flows into the other? Is this okay if there's a little bit of flowing, meshing, and I forget one thing and I can pick it up? I can pick it up. I can come back to it. I can do this. I got these different identities. Just a question. Just a thought. Just a thing to play with your own clients. What do you notice? And with this poly movement of clashing, some things don't go together. There can also be complementary polyrhythms that do go together. Here we go. So what happens when we have these polyrhythms that match? Yeah. So maybe I have this circle, this soft circle in my hips. Well, I have this 8 in my chest. Sometimes matching things, I picked a hard one, can help, and sometimes they can be hard. Too similar do things get foggy, or is it easier when things match? Find pieces that fit together or don't. We're going to go back to those again later. One last piece of this, what do we move? One area that we move a lot in belly dance is the navel. The navel, to some, is the place of the origin of creation. This is how we're nourished in the womb. We are all fed through the navel when we're inside of our mother is growing. So the navel is the place of creation. It's the place of life. It's the place of creativity. It's the place of strong emotions in a lot of cultures. Oh, I just knew it in my gut. My gut just had this feeling, right? Or, oh my gosh, it was so horrible, I felt nauseous. Yeah, or I just had this gaping hole in my stomach. We have these sayings that revolve around the navel. So what if we have a dance that revolves around the navel? Yeah, a lot of this movement passes through the navel, this going off center and coming back to our center and playing with our center. Where is our center? We talk about centering a lot in therapy, so why not utilize a movement that every time it goes off, it passes back through center, vertical, horizontal, whatever. It's going to twist. It's all coming and radiating from the center. Not always, but quite frequently, it honors the center. It honors the navel, this place of birth, this place of creativity, this place of heightened emotions. So there is my spiel on where do we move? Yeah. What do we move? What do we move? Now let's look at how we move. So how do we move? Belly dance has a nice broad movement vocabulary. We have shimmies, again, orienting with the knees. We might have a time shimmy, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. We might have a 3 shimmy that's so quick, it's fast twitch muscles, the muscles that you use when you're shivering, when you're so cold. Yeah. We might have a 3/4 shimmy. It's got a swing feeling to it. We have undulations. Yeah. We have downward undulation, upward undulations, undulations with the arms, these serpentines, these ripples that can go in different directions. Pops and locks, pops going up, locks going down, tightening, sharp, abrupt, staccato movements. There's your pelvic, Turkish pelvic drops, the Gypsy Romani pelvic drops, and the Udinal and Gwazi pelvic locks. And we also have circles. So we might have external circles, horizontal, vertical, put circles in different areas of the body, internal circles, and only eights that draw in, eights that push out, eights that ripple through the whole body, eights that are isolated, eights in one side, eights that are off center, eights that are perfectly mirrored. Yeah, lots of different eights. And then with all of these movement vocabulary, We have the different levels of awareness. What's an internal shimmy feel like? If you just focus on what's the inner experience, what is my experience of this shimmy versus what's it like to share this shimmy? Does my energy change? Does the size of the shimmy change? Does my awareness of self change? Yeah. What if I change my staging? Then I can have this sense of being seen, but my privacy. Do I feel coy? What emotions come up when I play with my staging? What emotions come up when I play with my size? And the energy or the tempo or the rhythm. There's so much texture. There's so much texture. Can we connect these two? Here was my racing pulse. If a client's having trouble connecting with breath, slow the breath down. If slowing the breath down is hard, can you put it in undulation? Yeah. So I was feeling kind of amped up. And if I make the undulation bigger, does that naturally help me slow it down? And maybe I'm not going to do this in public, but I can engage with it at home and have that mental awareness. If my brain doesn't connect with slowing down, can my brain connect with changing the size and the shape? And does that give me an insight that, oh, that connects and resonates with me? That helps me slow my pulse, bring down my anxiety. Using these tools to find movement that can match where our client's at. And then looking at the myriad of ways that we can alter these movements, helping with that transition. So now I invite you to take this time and explore on your own, okay? Pause the video, if you will, and put on some music. There's a ton of music you can find if you just search for belly dancing. If you want something modern, Jin, D-J-I-N-N, it's a Middle Eastern band that was based out of New York and had a beatboxer in it, so that's kind of fun. If you want something more traditional in Arabic, yeah, Hossam Ramsey, you can't go wrong there. From Turkey, there's the Rhythm Boys of Topkapı Palace. You can also check out Tarkan's song Up, it's just OP. It's a Turkish pop song meaning kiss, and one of my favorites. So I feel personally, for what it's worth, that you can have the liberty to use any music that speaks to you, because belly dance has so many different styles of movement, so many layers and manipulations of things that you can add on top of the movement and ways that you can do the movement, different body parts to do the movement in. So play with whatever music feels right, okay? So take a moment to have fun, get curious, try on some of these movements, try on isolating to full body, and just play and be curious. And then we're going to come back and then we'll kind of focus in and look at some of the actual research that has been done. But take this time to just be curious and explore with this very rich art form. Thanks. So welcome back. I hope you had fun. I hope you got creative and curious and had a little just curiosity and fun with that exploration. Now I would like to let's go back to the slides, and we're going to start looking at some of the research that is out there. So one of the pieces that I went to was this book by Gabriel Roth, Sweat Your Prayers, The 5 Rhythms of the Soul. And in this book, she discusses five rhythms. The first rhythm she identified was the rhythm of the earth, flowing. So flowing was the rhythm of the earth that she identified. She found it feminine, solid, sensual, containing the birth and life cycle, this taking in. And in belly dancing, I find the flowing rhythms to be undulations and figure eights and circles, all of these feminine flowing rhythms. Yeah. And after flowing, we have staccato. Staccato is fire. It's the masculine, it ignites, it consumes, it's moving from the bones, it's structural, it's childhood, it's letting go. And belly dance, I find this to be pops, locks, we use it for accents. And I also feel that shimmies could be under staccato, but personally, for what it's worth, I feel that a shimmy has these staccato movements, but it also has this element of flow, which starts to lead us into chaos. Chaos is where flow and staccato collide. So this is the meeting of the masculine and the feminine. This is being out of control. This is, in belly dancing to me, would be your clashing polyrhythms, yeah? That like sharpness on top of the smoothness. So we got the smooth flow going on, and then there are these sharp things coming out of the smooth flow. It's got these staccato moments. It creates this little sense of chaos. And after we pass through chaos, we move into lyrical. Lyrical has this air connotation. It's the aftermath of chaos. It's when we can acknowledge that we are just a work in progress. And it's the process of delightment. It's that knowing that it's enough just to simply be. It's the polyrhythm, to me in belly dancing, this is the polyrhythm of matching and complementing things when everything flows or everything is in chaos, or not chaos, everything is staccato. Yeah. Where everything starts to flow. And we have this lyrical quality because one flows into the other. Or we can have an 8 down below and a circle above. And they still fit in this lyrical quality. Yeah. Versus the clashing of like something sharp down here and something smooth out there, or vice versa. And after lyrical, we move into stillness. She defined this as the alchemist, where wisdom, compassion, and inspiration exist. In Oriental dance, I feel that this is the isolation, yeah, that moment of stillness. So we can appreciate one thing, and how just that one thing can have so much more power when the rest is still. So again, more things to play with, but starting to take all of these little pieces and starting to organize them. So where do we go from here? Now that we've taken all of this stuff, these ways to move, these what to move and how to move, and starting to arrange them. So again, narrowing in, because to do research, we've got to kind of start to pull things apart and look at the finite details and explore one piece of the puzzle at a time. So in my thesis study, I chose to look at 3 movement rhythms, which are central to this ancient dance form. So the 3 movement rhythms that I defined and I explored for my thesis study were staccato pops and locks, fluid figure eights, and vibratory shimmies. I started with 1 2-hour workshop, 2.5-hour workshop, and there's a lot of interest, so I had a second one. I did have a total of 9 participants. I did have a cutoff of 6 people for the size of the space that I was working in, and then my second session had 3 people. We started the session by walking through the space, bringing our awareness to the room, and slowly progressing to bring our awareness inside, first acknowledging people, and then gently touching our bodies, pressing or tapping to bring awareness to the surface of our bodies and the outline of our bodies, and then moving the awareness to our breath, feeling the internal side of our body, inviting women to start to come to a seated position or stand and close their eyes, again, drawing the awareness deeper into the self. And then taking that breath and just noticing the rhythm. In preparation for looking at these other rhythms, but just noticing the rhythm of the breath. And then kind of exaggerating that rhythm of their breath in that moment with their bodies. Exaggerating, making that breath externally visible. So here's that piece of internal to external. Yeah. And then we took that awareness and we found a comfortable spot and we did a focusing exercise. First starting with a body scan, starting at the head and moving to the feet to kind of end on a place where they were less likely to get stuck in thoughts. And to also have, these were all women who had personally identified with experiencing trauma, a lot of them sexual traumas in nature. So again, having other areas of the body to work through before getting to more sensitive areas. So after this initial body scan, moving from the head to the feet, participants were led through a focusing exercise as to approach the body with a sense of curiosity and sense where hope and wisdom resided within their body. We then took this, this idea of hope and wisdom and created a visual piece of art utilizing paper with outline figures, female figures, or neutral body gingerbread cutouts, or just plain construction paper. And the women made artwork based on where they experienced hope and wisdom. And then after that was completed, we moved back into a second focusing exercise where we explored where and how the body held uncomfortable emotions and unpleasant memories. And again, we took this information gained by focusing and moved it into the same piece of, using the same art supplies, created a second piece of artwork, exploring where and how the body held uncomfortable emotions and unpleasant memories. And from the second piece of artwork, we then engaged in a movement process of just following the inner impulses of what comes up, you know, branching off of this, delving deeper into this. And after women had about several minutes to explore this movement exploration on their own, then they were asked to create a little phrase that kind of encapsulated this exploration of uncomfortable emotion and unpleasant memories in their bodies. And all of the women chose to share, and we all reflected the movement back to help them feel seen and validated. And after this process had been completed, then we continued this sharing and trying on by me sharing the staccato pops and locks, demonstrating them, giving them time to try them on, get curious, and put them in different parts of their body and play with them. And then we did our figure eights and their vibratory shimmies. And again, we had time to experiment and try these on and get curious. And the women really embraced it, and there's laughter. And then the reality of, okay, now we're going to go back out. And I invited the women to take their original movement pieces and start to incorporate some of these elements into that initial movement piece. Being curious and playing with the ones that they felt resistance towards, being curious and playing with the ones that just really felt appropriate, that they gravitated towards. So again, we took a nice amount of time adding these movement rhythms into their pre-established phrase, their established phrase based on these unwanted emotions and unpleasant memories, and incorporating these staccato pops and locks, incorporating these fluid figure eights and these vibratory shimmies, not necessarily all of them, but whichever ones felt appropriate. And with the time and the exploration, it was amazing to see the shifts within these women. They went from very internalized, isolated, movement phrases, and the table plane started to be incorporated. There was more of this externalizing, this taking in, and sometimes one movement phrase would give way to another. And I invited the women to look at their movement phrase and to ask themselves how it felt. And if they wanted to change something, did they give themselves permission to change it? And there's a lot of release and then more exploration of grabbing a different movement rhythm. And then when we sat down and we shared these new phrases that came out of this exploration and we discussed it, women were sharing that the staccato pops and locks help them reclaim pieces of their body, help them reclaim their space around them. It helped them re-identify with a sense of power and the sense of it's okay for me to be here. It's okay for this to be my body. It's okay for me to say that this is my space and I'm going to own it. Fluid figure eights. Fluid figure eights were reported to be soothing, to help with self-exploration, to give new insight, to glean things that they haven't thought about in a new perspective. It helped women find more personal understanding of themselves. It helped them find their center and reground themselves, to go out and test and explore and come back to their center. And another one that everybody kind of gravitated and hit upon at some point in time was this vibratory shimmy. People recorded that it was a shaking loose, a shaking off, and it didn't matter if it was a mental, I'm shaking out my thoughts, or I'm shaking out my emotions, or I'm shaking my physical body, my physical tension. It was a process of letting go, a process of release, shaking loose and shaking off whatever was unwanted. It helped women reduce unwanted self-imposed limitations. This was one of those that really surprised me, but I had two women that were like, no, I put all these limits on myself, and this helped me break through those walls, crash those chains off that I put on myself. And it was a very powerful moment for them. Identifying forgiveness and reducing self-shaming tendencies was another thing that came about with shaming. So it has that soothing quality. I'm going to forgive myself. I'm going to stop shaming myself. I'm going to shake it off. And then people would gravitate back toward the figure eight sometimes. It's this self-soothing and moving back and forth in between all of these pieces. So here was one very narrowed example of just looking at these three specific movement qualities. Here are the very specific experiences that help these women find these emotional shifts from engaging in this movement. And one thing that I forgot to mention about the staccato pops and locks, there's a really great study done that in 2019, and it looked at how we not only identify emotions by the expression on our face, but how we can look at somebody's body and we know what emotion they're feeling. We can look at how they're moving and we know what they're feeling. And by engaging in this movement, we can enhance this feeling within ourselves. And with staccato pops and locks, anger was identified as quick, strong, and direct. Yeah, my anger has a target. My anger is quick, strong, and direct. Staccato pops and locks, they're quick, strong, and direct. So this releasing of anger was also present in the staccato pops and locks. Yeah, I can let this go. I can experience this and let it go. So this was a brief description of the flow of my research study and the experience that came out of it. Finally, looking at very specific actions and very specific findings of when we engage in these. And here's a list of my resources that were included on these slides. So I want to thank you for taking your time to join me virtually. And I want to thank you for your curiosity and your own self-exploration in trying on this dance. and looking at all of the different ways that this dance can connect to our clients and the work that we do, and looking into this little specific tiny little window of the start in the research into the specific movement qualities. And I feel honored to have this opportunity to share a little bit of the history and these movement qualities with you and this movement vocabulary. And I hope that you get curious and jump in on some of this research and start defining and getting curious and looking into these little nuggets of, you know, the whys and the how does this dance help so many people. So in closing, I just would like to offer the thought that the shape of our evolving world does not simply lie in our hands. It does not simply linger on our words, but it rests upon our hips. It breathes through our undulating torsos. It carves its path through our serpentine spines. It lives in every fiber of our being. And the more that we can incorporate our bodies, the more that we can get curious of the ways that we live them in our bodies and connect to the world through our bodies. This is where the wealth of this form of healing lives. So get curious and share your experiences with me. You can reach out to me. Again, my name is Jenny Nahir-Ish. You can find me on the Mindfulness Counseling website, just mindfulnesscounseling.com. You can also email me directly. My email is jennyishdmt@gmail.com, JENNYEISHDMT@gmail.com. You can also reach out to me via telephone. Please don't spam me, but please do call me and share your curiosities and your excitements and your 2 cents on using this dance form in therapy or in your own life. My phone number is 917-780-8809. Again, that's 917-780-8809. And lastly, I just want to thank you all for being here and bearing through this virtual experience with me. And let's just go out on a big old shimmy. Yeah, choo-choo shimmy. Travel around the floor, knocking over your water bottles. I hope you stayed hydrated. And I want to thank you. Thank you, everybody who attended this presentation. I hope you had a chance to move, and I hope you stay curious. Thanks. Bye.